The escalating conflict with Karen and the HOA reached another dramatic episode when they dialed emergency on my floating home, seemingly confident that their intervention could override my authority. What they failed to realize, once again, was that their assumptions about control, ownership, and influence were catastrophically mistaken. Within 10 minutes, their actions would result in consequences that were both immediate and unavoidable. The morning began with the floating home gently rocking on the calm waters of my farm pond. This structure was not merely a novelty. It was a fully functional extension of my property, equipped for both operational management and personal refuge. Karen, predictably, arrived with her HOA entourage, intent on asserting perceived authority. She dialed emergency, claiming that the floating home was in violation of regulations and that law enforcement should enforce her wishes. Officers arrived, expecting a standard dispute over property or water use. From the outset, however, it became clear that Karen had miscalculated. The floating home, anchored securely and fully documented, was entirely under my ownership. Legal papers, operational permits, and jurisdictional authority were presented calmly, leaving no ambiguity. Karen's claims, based on assumptions and entitlement rather than knowledge, quickly lost all credibility. In the meantime, I executed a calculated response. Using my control over the pond and its docking infrastructure, I maneuvered the floating home strategically. Within 10 minutes, the structure was positioned in a way that effectively acquired the HOA's docking rights, leaving them unable to intervene. This action was not merely a defensive maneuver. It was a precise demonstration of authority, highlighting how misjudged interference could be met with lawful and unavoidable consequences. Karen's reaction was immediate and frantic. She dialed emergency multiple times, attempted to mobilize her entourage, and shouted instructions, but the floating home's movement and my clear documentation left no room for enforcement. The officers, observing the situation, recognized that Karen's claims were baseless and that any attempt to act on her behalf would be both unlawful and futile. Her assumption that emergency intervention could override legal ownership had been thoroughly disproven. The HOA quickly realized that their perceived authority over the dock and waterway was now effectively nullified. Their attempts to regain control of the floating home were systematically blocked by strategic positioning, anchored access points, and legal documentation. Every action they took only reinforced the lesson. Intrusion without understanding or preparation results in consequences that are immediate and unavoidable. By midday, Karen's frustration had escalated to near panic. She attempted to coordinate additional interventions, instructing staff to challenge the floating home's position. Each effort failed, demonstrating the precision and inevitability of strategic authority when properly exercised. The HOA's inability to regain docking rights underscored a fundamental truth. Entitlement, emergency calls, and assumptions cannot override lawful, strategic, and prepared authority. To ensure the lesson endured, I implemented additional safeguards. The pond's docking systems were further fortified, waterway access monitored continuously, and legal documentation prominently displayed to prevent future misinterpretation. Karen's repeated misjudgments had created the perfect opportunity to demonstrate the practical and legal limits of her authority. By evening, the floating home was fully secured in a position that effectively neutralized the HOA's interference, while Karen and her entourage had retreated, humiliated and powerless. The community, witnesses to the incident, observed yet another clear pattern. Repeated interference without understanding, preparation, or lawful authority results in predictable failure and public exposure. This incident reinforced a central principle. Authority exercised strategically and lawfully cannot be undermined by assumption, panic, or entitlement. Karen's repeated attempts to manipulate the situation through emergency calls had failed spectacularly, leaving her exposed, frustrated, and publicly humiliated. The floating home, calm and secure, stood as a vivid symbol of mastery, lawful control, and the consequences of arrogance. By nightfall, the pond reflected the calm, steadfast control of the property and the inevitability of consequences for those who misjudge authority. Karen's interference had not only failed but had also provided a precise, unavoidable lesson. Intrusion without preparation, knowledge, or lawful standing invites immediate and inescapable repercussions.